Van Johnson names the gay actors of old Hollywood he dated in secret. Van Johnson was born Charles Vandal Johnson on August 25, 1916 in Newport, Rhode Island. He emerged from modest beginnings to become a major box office star at Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, symbolizing youthful optimism at a time when America desperately needed it. His life and career reflect not only the glamour of classic Hollywood, but also the vulnerability, resilience, and quiet courage of a man who endured personal struggles behind the scenes while continuing to give audiences warmth and hope. Van Johnson's early life was marked by hardship and determination. After the death of his father, he was raised largely by his mother, Loretta Cinder, who encouraged his interest in performance. As a teenager, Johnson gravitated toward theater and music, developing a love for acting that would shape his future. He moved to New York City to pursue a career on Broadway, where he worked diligently in chorus roles and minor parts, gaining valuable stage experience. These early years were not glamorous. They were defined by long hours, uncertainty, and financial strain. Yet Johnson's perseverance paid off when Hollywood talent scouts noticed his boyish good looks and natural stage presence. Johnson's transition to film stardom came after signing with MGM, the studio that would define his career. Initially cast in small roles, his breakthrough arrived during World War II when his clean-cut appearance and relatable demeanor resonated deeply with American audiences. Unlike the rugged or cynical heroes of their eras, Van Johnson represented the everyman, kind, approachable, and emotionally transparent. This quality made him especially effective in wartime films where he portrayed soldiers not as invincible warriors, but as human beings shaped by fear, friendship, sacrifice, and love. One of the defining moments of Johnson's life occurred in 1943 when he suffered a devastating on-set accident during the filming of A Guy Named Joe. A falling camera crane struck his head, causing severe injuries that nearly ended his career and his life. Doctors feared he might not survive, and his recovery was long and painful. The accident left permanent scars and required metal plates to be implanted in his skull. Remarkably, rather than diminishing his appeal, the public's awareness of his ordeal deepened their affection for him. Johnson returned to the screen transformed, not only physically, but emotionally, bringing an added depth and sensitivity to performances. Throughout the mid to late 1940s, Van Johnson reached the height of his popularity. Films such as 30 Seconds Over Tokyo, Battleground, The Caine Mutiny, and In the Good Old Summertime showcased his versatility, allowing him to move seamlessly between war dramas, romantic comedies, and musical films. He frequently played roles that emphasized loyalty, moral integrity, and emotional honesty, traits that aligned closely with his public image. Audiences trusted Van Johnson. He felt familiar, like a friend or brother, and that trust translated into enduring popularity. Despite his success, Johnson's personal life was far more complicated than his wholesome screen persona suggested. He was intensely private and often struggled with the pressures of fame, studio expectations, and the limitations placed on personal expression in mid-century Hollywood. The rigid studio system demanded conformity, leaving little room for individuality or vulnerability. Johnson navigated these challenges quietly, maintaining professionalism while coping with emotional isolation and health issues stemming from his earlier accident. As Hollywood evolved in the 1950s and 1960s, Johnson's star power gradually declined, but his commitment to acting never wavered. He continued to work steadily in film, television, and theater, including Broadway and touring productions. In later years, he found renewed appreciation among fans who admired his legacy and the grace with which he aged in the industry. His later performances carried a reflective quality enriched by experience and a lifetime of observation. Van Johnson's marriage to former stage actress Eve Abbott on January 25, 1947 unfolded against a glamorous yet tightly controlled backdrop of Hollywood's golden age, a period when studio contracts often dictated not only an actor's professional life, but also his personal image. At the time, Johnson was one of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer's most bankable stars. Beloved by audiences for his wholesome all-American charm, his easy smile, and his boy-next-door appeal, MGM had invested heavily in cultivating that image, and his wedding to Eve Abbott was widely publicized as a fairy tale union that seemed to confirm everything fans believed about him. There was the ideal romantic leading man, settling into domestic bliss at the height of his fame. Eve Abbott herself was no stranger to the entertainment world. A former stage actress, She possessed poise, intelligence, and an understanding of the public scrutiny that came with lifey and show business. Their marriage produced one child, a daughter named Skylar, who became the emotional center of Johnson's family life. By many accounts, Van was a devoted father, deeply affectionate and protective of his daughter. Friends and associates later recalled that whatever complexities existed in his marriage, his love for Skylar was genuine and enduring, and he took pride in being present for her in a way that contrasted with the often absent fathers common in Hollywood at the time. Through his marriage to Eve, Johnson also became a stepfather to her two sons from a previous relationship, Edmund Keenan and Tracy Keenan Wynn. Tracy, in particular, would later carve out a successful career as a screenwriter, contributing to films such as The Longest Yard. Van's role as a stepfather added another layer to his domestic identity, one that reinforced his public image as a family man. While the dynamics within the household were not always smooth, Johnson reportedly made sincere efforts to be supportive and involved, navigating the challenges of blending families while under constant public observation. Despite the polished exterior presentation of the world, the marriage began to strain under pressures both personal and professional. By 1961, Van Johnson and Eve Abbott had separated, signaling the quiet unraveling of a relationship that had lasted more than a decade. The separation was not immediately followed by divorce, reflecting both the social conventions of the era and the complexities of their situation. It was not until 1968, 7 years later, that the marriage was formally dissolved. By then, Johnson's star had dimmed from its peak, and the rigid studio system that once controlled every aspect of his life had largely collapsed, allowing for more openness, though still limited, about personal truths. In the years following their separation and divorce, Eve Abbott made statements that cast their marriage in a far more complicated light. According to Eve, Van Johnson was gay, and she asserted that their marriage had been orchestrated by MGM as a so-called lavender marriage, onion designed to present a heterosexual facade and suppress rumors about Johnson's sexuality. Such arrangements were not uncommon in mid-century Hollywood, where careers could be destroyed by even a whisper of homosexuality. Studios went to great lengths to protect their stars from scandal, often encouraging or arranging marriages that would reassure the public and preserve box office appeal. For decades, Van Johnson was promoted as the embodiment of wholesome all-American masculinity. With his boyish smile, red hair, and approachable charm, MGM carefully crafted his public image as the ideal romantic leading man. Yet behind the studio created illusion, Johnson later hinted at a far more complex personal life, one shaped by secrecy, coded relationships, and quiet rebellion against Hollywood's rigid moral expectations. In rare private conversations late in life, Johnson reportedly acknowledged that he had romantic relationships with other men during the golden age of Hollywood, naming specific actors he dated while living under the constant pressure of studio surveillance. "I didn't have the luxury of being honest," Johnson once admitted. In those days, honesty could destroy everything you worked for. Hollywood in the 1940s and 1950s was governed by strict morality clauses, and homosexuality was considered scandalous, dangerous, and career-ending. For stars under contract, being openly gay was simply not an option. Johnson understood this reality better than most. At the height of his fame, he was one of MGM's most valuable properties, and the studio carefully monitored his social life, friendships, and romantic appearances. Among the men Johnson reportedly mentioned was actor Montgomery Clift, another MGM star whose sensitive screen persona masked deep personal turmoil. According to accounts attributed to Johnson, the two men shared a quiet, emotionally intense relationship that existed entirely out of public view. Monty was different. Johnson allegedly said he felt everything deeply, and that made him dangerous to himself and irresistible to others. Their connection, according to later biographers, was rooted in mutual understanding. Both men were trapped by expectations they could never fully meet. Johnson also allegedly spoke of Tab Hunter, a younger actor who rose to fame in the 1950s and later confirmed his own homosexuality. While Hunter would eventually live openly during his early career, he was forced into studio-arranged romances designed to maintain a heterosexual image. Johnson reportedly remarked, "Tab was sweet, scared, and very young. We were all pretending, but he hated pretending the most." Their relationship, if it occurred, would have been brief and carefully hidden, shaped by fear more than freedom. Another name often associated with Johnson in historical speculation is Rock Hudson, perhaps the most famous example of Hollywood's enforced secrecy. Though no definitive evidence exists of a romantic relationship between the two, Johnson reportedly acknowledged that many actors in his circle shared similar hidden lives. Rock understood the rules better than anyone. Johnson is said to have remarked, "You smiled, you dated who they told you to date, and you never slipped." Whether friends, confidants, or something more, Johnson and Hudson were part of an unspoken fraternity bound by excellence. Johnson emphasized that these relationships were not casual affairs, but emotional lifelines in an industry that demanded denial. "We weren't sneaking around for thrills," he explained. "We were trying to survive without losing ourselves completely." Secrecy became second nature. Meetings arranged through trusted intermediaries, conversations held in private homes, and an ever-present fear of exposure. His marriage to Eve Abbott in 1947 has often been cited as part of MGM's image management strategy, and Johnson himself later acknowledged the artificial nature of many Hollywood marriages. "Some people marry for love," he said. "Others marry for protection.